So hello, a warm welcome to all of you here in the room and also to all of you on the line to this session, Investing with Purpose in Frontier Markets, which is a session that is directly linked to our ongoing initiative at the World Economic Forum and with our key partners called Humanitarian Resilience Initiative. My name is Mirek Dušek. I am Managing Director at the World Economic Forum. And I have with me here leaders that have been, and their organization, that have been involved in this work for some time. So I just would like to underscore that this is really not a panel that is there to respond to a current need, but it's really something that is ongoing, and it's been a part of our focus for a while. So let me introduce you. I have here Anne Beate Tvinnereim, a Norwegian Minister for International Development. A warm welcome. Marie-Laure Akin Olugbade, Vice President, Regional Development, Integration and Business Delivery at the African Development Bank Group. Jessica Anderen, Chief Executive Officer at the IKEA Foundation, newly arrived. And of course, Peter Maurer, who, as you know, was leading ICRC for a long time. You're also the co-chair of the initiative and really someone who has helped us develop it to the state where it is right now. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, let me just start a little bit with the overall framing of the meeting, because we are gathered here under the theme Rebuilding Trust. When we were to break it down, what we are trying to actually do here this week, we're trying to do two things. One is to really focus on dialogue, given the polarization that is there and the erosion of trust in societies and also among nations. And of course, we have these geopolitical shocks that are top of mind of all of us. But we're also looking to move firmly towards solutions. And so if I were to somehow put it in this continuum, I think our discussion, because we've been at it for a while, would be more in the solution space. So we're trying to say, okay, there are a lot of transformations that are taking place. They're frankly putting people living in fragile markets and frontier markets in increased distress. And so we've been at it for a while. We are trying to, number one, bring this to the attention of the international community, but also bring it to the attention of investors and mainstream business community. Of course, you have impact investors, but we've been really working hard to also involve other actors in the private sector, because we believe that it is really through public-private partnerships in these markets that we can make a difference. Now, of course, there is always a situation where humanitarian aid and humanitarian assistance is necessary, and there will always be that space. But if you look at a lot of these societies, we see that sometimes they are fragile over a long period of time. You also have societies that are falling back into conflict, or that would be again struck by a natural disaster. And so also the interconnectedness between the humanitarian actors and the development actors is something that we've been looking at and working towards. So as I said, this initiative has been there for a while, namely established in 2019, actually here at the annual meeting in Davos. Peter, you were there. But what we did last year in September, we used the platform of the Sustainable Development Impact Meetings of the World Economic Forum then to launch a new call to action. So we had a call to action with over 50 organizations to mobilize $10 billion in commercial and catalytic capital to enable 1,000 local and international businesses in frontier markets to scale by 2030. So that was our call to action back in September. to make a contribution in that direction. And we're quite happy because since then, we've seen that 40 of these organizations have now announced concrete commitments that would really be at the level of 15 billion in commercial and catalytic capital. So in a way, a positive surprise. You see that there is an uptake in terms of that call to action. Now, there is more to it, so I'll let also my colleagues on the panel to then talk about different aspects of the initiative. But just to say that we are at a milestone moment for the initiative, and we hope that through this conversation we are able to persuade those of you who are still not involved and those of you who are watching online to get involved and help us with this. So I already introduced the august panel that I have today. And so let me turn to you. I would like to start with Peter. Again, you are the co-chair of the initiative. You know it very well. And so help us orient ourselves in terms of the historical continuum on this. Do you think that now we get very excited about the call to action and we see the commitments? Do you think that we are, let's say, entering a new chapter, a new era where more and more actors will be involved in frontier markets?
Well, a very interesting question. I would agree with you that we are on a watershed moment, and that while if we compare what we have achieved since 2019 is maybe modest compared to the needs that we are seeing popping up everywhere in the world, it is considerable in terms of important elements which come to a critical tipping point moment for the initiative. I think we have made the proof of concept. Mm-hmm. We have gathered a conceptual agreement that shifting in many of the contexts from the logic of aid to investing in global public goods, in social goods of society, fragile society, is important. We are part of a larger impact investment movement, and we have focused on the specificity of investing in fragile frontier market. We have sort of zoomed into where we would like to make a difference. We started to generate enthusiasm and consensus for what you alluded to in your introduction, Mirek, is that it's not about private capital only, but it's about bringing different actors. Global development banks, finance institution, philanthropic capital, different forms of capital together, and find a way to see who has his role or her role and at what moment of the process. Mm-hmm. And I think that we start to build this ecosystem, which seems to me critically important. And at the same time, let's not forget, the world has become even more messier than it was in 2019. So the pressure to find other solutions than the one which are mainstream solution in the international community has increased. And while I don't want to minimize those existing solutions, but it's still important that we do recognize that markets don't work as they should for people in fragile contexts. And aid doesn't work as we have expected it to work, and we can't anyway not finance the amount which is upcoming. And so the call to action is an important moment because it gathered the thoughts of many different actors, and it focalized our energies on a couple of things moving this initiative forward. Alignment for me is still the most important. Having a clearer idea on how exactly we combine the different strengths of actors in order to build a value chain for impact in fragile contexts seems to me absolutely critical. So I do believe that we are at a critical moment. I don't want to sort of overpromise, but what I have seen from the follow-up to the commitments in the context of the call to action is promising. It really goes from financial promises to cooperation promises to identifying further the concrete. And I hope that next year when we meet, that this will be a little bit of a different conversation, because we will be in more places, we will have done more funds or financial instruments towards basic needs of people in fragile contexts. That's, I think, I agree with many words to say that I agree with you, Mirek, about a watershed moment, a critical moment where we are today to develop this initiative.
Thank you so much. And if I could just follow up with one more question, because part of our work has also been then focused on a specific region. So we back when we were in New York, we also looked specifically in northern Kenya, so that we can also have some concrete examples on what to do. Would you mind sharing a little bit what we are doing there?
Well, I think the trigger to concretize this initiative, it boils down also to political leadership of governments who take on board this idea and start to offer a framework for all those different actors. And the US and Kenyan government have really spared no effort to embrace the concept, to bring the community along, and to see what are the legislative frameworks that we need to change in order to facilitate investment, in order, for instance, to mobilize the idle capacity of the refugee community and put it to work in investable projects. So political leadership is so critical. It won't happen just to bring capital and implementing capacities in a room. You need political recognition and leadership, and this is of critical importance also to overcome, I haven't spoken too much about it, about the obstacles that we will encounter. This is not obstacle-free. It's not a highway to pleasure and investment. It will be full of roadblocks and obstacles, and we can only remove them. We can only change and also tweak the mandates, the behaviors of all those different actors if we have political leadership. And I hope that the model that the Kenyan and US government have taken it to embrace this initiative will be followed by other groups of countries, by other groups of organizations, because we need somebody to set the tone politically.
Thank you so much. So you mentioned political leadership. So I have a minister next to me, Minister Tvenerheim. So your government has been already aligning your humanitarian and development efforts. But overall, why is your government involved in the Humanitarian Resilience Initiative? Again, thank you, because you've been with us for a while. So just for people here and also those of you who are watching us, to understand why Norway thinks this is important.
Well, thank you. I think the why is quite obvious, because we see now that the humanitarian situations out there are increasing in volume, in scale. The needs are increasing, while at the same time the financial space to address this through public funding is shrinking. We need to be much, much smarter. And we need to make sure that as we invest in humanitarian settings, we need to think prevention from the start and think long-term from the start. That doesn't mean that we need to merge everything. You know, that's that we merge humanitarian investments, long-term investments. We still need to do our part, but we need to work much closer together. And so that is what the Nexus is all about. Now, in Norway, we have we are updating our humanitarian strategy to apply Nexus in a smarter way. We are reforming our administration to make sure that we don't work in silos. But I think the most important thing is to, as we design programs from the start. We need to think long term from day one. And we need to get private thinking on board when possible. And of course, each setting is very different. But what we know from what we've learned the hard way is that if we don't think about existing local private markets in humanitarian settings, we can end up doing a lot of damage. We need to make sure that where there are existing private markets, we must invest in them, develop them, because that is, that's the best prevention there is. Now, in terms of doing that, in practical terms, what Norway has done, just to give you an example, is that we have set up what we call a HIP program. It's humanitarian innovation, getting private sector on board when we address humanitarian investments. And it's not about private money. It's about getting your expertise and the innovation. Because otherwise, we need to think out of the box. And let's be frank, the public sector hasn't always been great at that. So we need private investors to come with their innovative skills and think freshly about how to set up things. So the idea is to get innovative solutions that are sustainable and, when feasible, self-financing. Of course, that's not always the case. I'm just going to give you one concrete example that I'm very proud of. Uganda, FAO and Manduli's Energy were able to set up a circular economy model using waste from the agricultural sector for biofuel and gas, fueling the energy system, and it was thanks to pulling together public funding and new thinking from private sector.
Great, thank you. And you reminded me that this initiative is also about bringing the examples from these markets where we are working with entrepreneurs. So the CEO of that company actually joined us in New York. So to also concretize how does it actually work, and how these examples then can be scaled also with the support of this initiative. And just to, as I did with Peter, I also know, to be a little more concrete as well, you earlier this year announced with the US government the FASA Fund, Financing for Agricultural Small and Medium Enterprises in Africa, which is really aimed at de-risking investment in agricultural growth. So if you could also tell us a little bit more about that so that others can get involved.
Thank you. I'm super excited about the FASA Fund. It's really, we're really setting up something that does not exist from the beginning. It's actually a first loss facility, putting up a multi-donor facility where investments along the value chains from small-scale farmers to the local markets can tap in. These are companies, small and medium-sized enterprises that earlier would fall between two chairs. They're too small for the commercial banks, too big for microfinance, sorry. As you said, the US and Norway are setting it up right now. We need more investors on board, and it's open for commercial banking. It's open for foundations. It's open for private investments and public funding. I think it's a really exciting way to address a value chain which, especially in Africa, is absolutely essential, with huge potential for making the good wheels running in terms of development.
Thank you so much. Let me move to Jessica Anderen, Chief Executive Officer of IKEA Foundation. As I said, you are relatively new in your new position, but you have a lot of experience from IKEA. Prior to this, you were the CEO of IKEA Switzerland, but I think you also had global sustainability role for IKEA. So obviously you are at the beginning of your term. I'm sure you are thinking about where you're gonna take it. What are you gonna also, maybe there are things you will do differently, or you will do new things. So how do you, with that fresh perspective, how do you look at this initiative, Humanitarian Resilience Initiative, and the model that it stands for, with your experience also as a CEO of IKEA Switzerland?
I have a lot of hope and optimism when I'm listening also into everything that is going on. And of course, I will build on all the great things that we have done through IKEA Foundation over the last 15 years. We have a really strong vision and mission within IKEA from a brand perspective, and also IKEA Foundation. And also we really put people at heart in everything we do. So when saying that, it's very important component to really, it's a global problem where we need to find local solution and really also come together with speed. So also what I bring with me is really this, that we cannot do it alone, right? We need to do it with many other stakeholders. And what I hear in every meeting I've been to here, and also had the opportunity to be part of different meetings during the end of last year, I feel like the whole radical collaboration is so much on the agenda. I feel though we need to probably be a little bit more practical and actionable around the radical collaboration, and also really bring in communities. And because that's something that sits in our values at IKEA, to create a better everyday life for the many people and always put people in the core. So the communities needs to be around the table in order to really, for us then to support in helping to drive the solution that actually works on the ground. And I think it's another thing that's very important for me is that we are working with long-lasting solutions, that we really step in and really identify what is the big need, and having people around the table around that, and that's part of all the way out to the end. Then I think it's another component in order for us to gain speed, which we need, is to really share the successes and failures. And I think we need to talk much more about the failures as well. That sits in our DNA also from an IKEA perspective, but I think that's a very important component. So we don't, end up doing the same problems in other fields. So for me, that's another part. And I think we're going to continue to be courageous to really unlock risk capital in this particular field. But I think it's really coming together with communities, and especially, I will share also an example, right, that we've been working with, but it's something also to really make sure that the refugees and the host communities are really together in every single step on the way in order to make it succeed. And that, I think, it's a very, we cannot not step into supporting and really nurturing that from the beginning. And that, I think, it's one of the most important thing that really sits with me, also constantly really making sure that we put people in the core, and that we keep it running from a sustainable, long-lasting livelihood perspective.
No, thank you so much. Can I just ask you, with your experience, because I know your foundation also works on climate, for emerging markets, and do you see that it is, or what would you take from that realm in terms of getting investors excited and really rallying around these opportunities, and bring it to the humanitarian resilience realm, which is, of course, partly also could be on sustainable investments, but it's a little bit larger. Are there things we could do differently that would, let's say, maybe enable the relative traction that we're seeing in climate finance, also in general, toward other sectors within frontier markets?
Yeah, because I think everything is connected, right? The solutions that we've been looking and that we've been driving in different places are actually, connected to agriculture, livestock, energy, and environmental aspects. So I think, maybe I'm very blunt in this, but I think we need also to really discuss who's responsible for what, because we are sitting in a global dilemma where we really need all to step up, and we can see a lot of benefits, and we have some good solutions that it's actually possible to scale what's working, but that we need to sit down and really discuss who's responsible for what, with a clear arc, accountability, responsibility, and contributing. But because I think at times when I've been now to different meetings, how do we pick up this very important component for things to happen? Because I'm used to that, constantly working also in a business arena, that we always identify, what role do we play? What is the role, goal, and context of me running a philanthropy now, of somebody else from the private sector, non-profit, government? But I think we need to be much more blunt in the way of how we are discussing these topics. So yes, the answer is yes. I think it's a field where we need to really step into, and I think everything is connected. But it also requires a lot of leadership.
Yes, as Peter said.
Exactly, that we need to really pick up on, all of us.
Thank you. I think also, because of course some of these commitments will then come to the public realm as well, and so there at least you see it bottom up in terms of which sectors actually will be addressed and by whom, but absolutely. And then just to follow the same pattern, I know you have already an initiative in Doloado in Ethiopia, where you've invested $100 million. So again, if you could describe it, because we are looking to learn from these models to see what we can scale.
Yeah, I mean, this is a project that we've been working with for 10 years to really focus on sustainable livelihood. And as I also shared from the beginning, it's a really working on a togetherness with the refugees and the host communities. And that's been really kind of going beyond the humanitarian support in the way of how we approached it. And it's really to work also with, you can say, local development. And one example is to create cooperatives. And that we can see as a big benefit of the social environment, because the cross, you can say, way of working with agricultural, livelihood, energy, and environmental aspects in the community really leads to a lot of benefits. It leads to benefits from improved food security, higher incomes. It's about entrepreneurship, and it's also women empowerment. So we can see the benefits are really clear, and we have shared that. But it takes a lot of time. And you need to be resilient, and you also need to keep the feet on the ground to really do the right thing. I think also we need to be quicker in the scaling of what's really working. And I think it's, it's not only about new and innovation, it's also to really scale basic things. And that I think we also need to discuss much more. It's really moving away from serving beneficiaries to really look into what's the shared value for all. And that is the only way forward. And that means that we need to come together from an integration perspective already from the beginning. And we need to bring in multi-stakeholder partnership in every single step of the journey in order to really make this work. But it's actually a really good example. I think we have used it now many times. We discussed it in many areas. But now it's about really scaling, because it works. And that's when we need many more stakeholders to come in and really take it forward in order to really drive the change that we wish to see.
Thank you so much. If I could go move to Marie-Laure. As I said, you are at the African Development Bank. You're the vice president. I'm sure you all know the African Development Bank is really the premier institution with so much experience and expertise in supporting sustainable growth in Africa. And so when you listen to the conversation, and you're also now part of the initiative, but help us understand what the bank is doing. And again, I would like to underscore you've been doing over many years to support private sector involvement and public-private partnerships, if you will, in frontier markets.
Thank you very much, Milek, and I'm really delighted to be here and to have an opportunity to continue the conversation that we started in New York in September last year. And because I really strongly believe that we have a perfect alignment about really the objective and, of course, the collective efforts that we are all putting in to make sure that we really increase the space and the number of actors, the number of private sector companies who are really investing in frontier market. As you know, Milek, 85% of the population on the continent live either in a country or has a border with a country that is affected by conflict. On top of that, you lay the challenges of climate change. 9 out of 10 countries, according to the recent Vulnerability Index, are in Africa. And you have indeed, unfortunately, a recipe for having the need for more humanitarian intervention on the continent. And really the way we approach the situation, I think we try to do 3 things. The first one is, and I think I was discussing it with Jessica and Peter earlier on, is that we think that we need to tell the story. Yes, there is the story of all of these challenges and risks, but there is also, I think, a formidable story of the amazing investment opportunities that the continent offers. And I want to say for the savvy investor. The savvy investor is one who knows that things are not easy, who knows that he needs to be a little bit more patient, that he needs to do things slightly differently. And this is why I'm so delighted to be part of this panel, because we are hearing precisely from the partners that we are working with from the government. And thank you so much, Madam Minister. The government of Norway has been a very strong supporter of everything that we do. We would like to work more with foundation. So telling the story about what the continent offers is already a very good step in getting this private sector to crowd in. Yes, the energy poverty that we are complaining about, the 600 million Africans who are still not have access to electricity, for us, it is an opportunity. And mind you, unfortunately, 75% of these 600 million are in fragile environment, frontier market that we are really discussing. So addressing and being able to crowd in the hundreds of billions of dollars that we need annually to bring the continent to universal access to energy by 2030 is going to be found with structured partnership with the private sectors. And we have a number of initiatives to do that. I could talk to you about the Desert to Power initiative, which is happening in the Sahel region, where the objective is really to mobilize $20 billion, and we are already well advanced in doing that, to create and to help generate 10 gigawatts of electricity using renewable sources, and that will help address the energy poverty of 250 million people on the continent. These are the kind of initiatives, these are the kind of projects where we really would like to crowd in the private sector, working, and each one understanding the role they need to play, and I think you said it, we need to have more visibility about who does what, but also taking on the risk that they are best placed to take on. And from that perspective, for example, in addition to telling the story of the opportunities, the bank has been able to really come up with very impactful alliances. And more we are working beyond the scope of course, the financial institution, the world of the donors, and we are really working with humanitarian and peace actors. You may remember that at the last recently concluded Africa Resilience Forum held in Abidjan in October, we really had a formidable participation from all these new actors, we are exploring approaches about peace-positive investment. We want to work more on the prevention side. And these are new approaches, new actors, new partnerships. And of course, we are a bank. So we have, of course, the suite of financial instruments that are supposed to really help give comfort to private investors, leverage their participation. We are able to, lend long-term, of course. We are able to, working, again, with donor countries, develop blended finance facilities. We're able to develop our capabilities to lend in local currency. This is one risk that investors do not like to take, foreign exchange risk. So we are really working at that frontier. But what investors tell us also is we need those projects. And this is why we are also developing our capabilities. And just to mention one example, the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa is an approach, is a method where we really hope to crowd in, and we have been already successful in mobilizing a lot of interest to develop a project, bankable project in the whole green infrastructure area. And by mobilizing $500 million for project preparation facilities, we hope to be able to bring about investment worth $10 billion, which would still be a drop in the ocean of the needs of the continent. But we need to provide this type of platform to crowd in the private sector. Those who really mean it, they know where to find those opportunities, and this is what we also see as our role. And by way of de-risking, I think it's also important to mention a very groundbreaking role that we are playing in at the request of the African Union, developing security index investment bonds. For us, this is an instrument where we really need to help governments address the issues of insecurity that is unfortunately developing and crowding out, unfortunately, the investment. And here, what we would like these security index investment bonds, once they are structured, once they are issued, is to really be able to quickly help governments when they are faced with disastrous event, be they weather-related or terrorism, to be able to quickly put back the infrastructure that is damaged to work. It's important for us to also invest in the social infrastructure, water, and this is at the grassroots level. Oftentimes, in the areas where these big projects are happening, because it's important to make sure that we carry along everyone. And the third aspect that these security index investment bond will help us do is to also help governments protect strategic assets, strategic investment for the country. So I hope that we really have an opportunity to do things differently, and the time is now. And we are really inviting all the actors, and I'm really delighted that foundations are new partners that we would like to do much more business with.
Thank you so much. I'll have one more follow-up question, but also we'll have time for one or two questions from the audience, if you have, so you can prepare. But just to follow up, because if I remember correctly, you've also been doing a lot of innovation in terms of how you work with the agricultural sector. And obviously, this is a hugely important sector. We also have some of our commitments in that sector. So could you just talk a little bit about some of those tools that you have there?
No, definitely. As we said, you can look at the private sector and inviting the private sector to come and join. Of course, there is a country focus, but we think that there is also a lot of value in working at the sector level. And there are some sectors which are probably lend themselves more to others. For us, we think that agriculture sector is definitely a sector where we can work with everybody, and everybody has a role to play. Let me take the example of indeed agriculture. 3 elements. Convening power of the African Development Bank. January last year, we were able to invite within 72 hours 34 heads of states of government to join us in Dakar to talk about how Africa is going to feed itself and how we are going to feed the rest of the world. This was extraordinary because this was an event where head of states came with their teams and with very clear what we are now calling food and agriculture delivery compact, and come and tell us, this is what I would like to do, these are the sectors that I would like to develop, these are the investment that they need, and this is what I am willing to do to make those things happen. So government committing themselves, which again is one risk that private sector does not like, visibility about and consistency of government action. Second part of it was, how do we go about it? What do we do? And I would like to talk about the incredible success of the technology for agriculture transformation in Africa that we have really mainstream in various countries. And I would like to give the example of Ethiopia, where by really focusing on climate resilient seeds, working with the private sector to develop the seeds, to basically produce the seeds that were developed in research institutes, adapted to the context in Africa, we have been able to help Ethiopia basically in the space of 4 years to be able to, from an importer of wheat to become now on way to self-sufficiency and also exporting. And we are particularly happy with the agreement that they signed, for example, with Kenya, to be able to export now this wheat to Kenya. And I think these are very concrete examples where everybody has a role to play and who can do much more across the continent.
Thank you so much. I'm just looking around if anyone has a question. So Madam here, and then we'll have one more there, and then I'll go to Peter too. Maybe you can mention a few next steps. So please.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? My name is Aissata, I'm from Mauritania, YGL. We were asked to mention it, so I'm mentioning it. And I lead the investment agency in Mauritania. I just wanted to make a comment and also ask a question. First of all, salute the work of the FDB. We've been working a lot with them. Mauritania is part of the Desert to Power, and we're also in Dakar for the Feed Africa, so great initiatives. When we talk about frontier markets, me in my position, leading the investment agency, you talked about the risk perception, which is great. Sometimes when we talk to donors or potential investors, and when we have initiatives that want to be started, there are always the usual suspects, the countries, frontier market countries, but that are comfortable enough and not too frontier that we will start and then scale maybe. But the rest of the countries like Mauritania, they're often forgotten. Why? And what can we do to change that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe if you allow, then I'll collect the second question, and then I'll actually have you, if you want to react. I suppose, I think, here.
My name is Sheila Patel. I'm a Schwab Fellow also. I'm also one of the ambassadors for the Race to Resilience in the COP, working on issues of cities. And the small point I want to bring to your notice is that you all talked about agriculture, rural areas. And a lot of your work with people who run away from crisis or wars being in camps. The reality of the work we do in cities shows that more and more people prefer to run away and become invisible and get into urban informal areas. And a lot of the densification of informal settlements in Asia and Africa that I know about emerges from conflicts. Yet no humanitarian organization actually has come to this conclusion. And looking at future projects in which you have to include this in your program.
Very interesting.
And I feel that it's a very important point because the World Bank itself, when there were discussions about what was happening in the Middle East, they found more people had gone into neighboring cities and living in slums with their kinship groups or others. And there were no ways to even acknowledge that this was being done. there was total invisibility, and the same kind of crisis you talked about of people who come in and the residents is happening in these urban neighborhoods where the residents themselves are informal, illegal, and invisible. So I just want to put this as something that's going to happen in the next 20 years as more and more crisis is going to push people. So they're expecting 4 billion people to live in cities, and I can tell you 2 billion are going to come into informal settlements.
Yeah.
No.
It's important for you to start looking at that rather than react to it, because I think you've started a wonderful possibility.
Thank you. We're really out of time. If you have a question?
It's a comment.
Just very short, and then I'll very shortly have reaction. So please, you need a mic, though. If you can pass the mic. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. In a previous life, I raised and managed the first private equity fund for Afghanistan globally, which is, pretty frontier. And we learned a lot. And I think, Jessica, your comment about learning from failures is really important. And this sector is just rife with poor learning, no long-term tracking, high turnover of staff, structurally impact investing criteria and monitoring and evaluation is broken, needs totally rethinking. So yeah, I really encourage you to learn from stuff that's happened before. Some of the things that you're contemplating make me shudder because I've kind of gone through some of these things, and it's really, really hard in markets like Afghanistan. So yeah, happy to input if required.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I'll finish with Peter. So let me first go with the minister. You can either react or you can just have some closing, but really 30 seconds each. So very quick fire. We are out of time.
Okay, I'll be very, very quick
1
then.
minute.
On risk perception and risk reduction and how it's, how do we get investments into more countries? Well, the perception is a problem. I've discussed this with with our colleague Akin in the African Development Bank as well. There are things that can be done. I have one example that I like to use, which is an investment into solar plants in solar energy in Somalia, where MIGA, a risk reduction facility set up in the World Bank, where Norway is investing, actually made it possible to, very close to the hostilities of Al-Shabaab, were able to set up a plant with solar energy for refugee camps and hospitals in Baidoa in Somalia.
Okay.
Super risky, but it can be done if we design guarantee mechanisms and schemes in the right way. And that's why I'm here in Davos, because I want to get private sector's input into how do we design these schemes to make it interesting. Great point on informal settlements. But it's a win-win, right? Because we can, because you mentioned food security, and if we are able to invest in value chains and local markets, be it rural, be it urban, or especially the rural-urban links, we can achieve so much reduction of food security and development and job creation. So I think there are lots to be done, and we haven't forgotten informal settlements.
Thank you so much. Jessica, a quick reaction, then Marilou, and then Peter.
Yeah, I think it's, I'm thinking that it starts with us, right? And we need to identify what is the role, goal, and context being in the philanthropy that I'm now responsible for. And we need to really walk the talk. And we need to have a clear arc. That's my accountability, responsibility, and contributing. Because if we are really going to make things or scale things that works with speed, we just need to step into pulling up our sleeves and really do things.
Thank you.
So I'm very pragmatic in that.
Very
Thank
shortly.
you, and thank you very much for the question. And I agree with you that when it comes to investing, private sector investment, they are the usual suspects. They are the countries, we know them. But I think one good thing is that let's learn from what they are doing right. They must be doing a few things right to deserve that positioning. And let's work with those countries who still need a little bit of help. One area, of course, which is extremely important is how do you sell the country? Who are the first point of contact of investors when they come in the country? Your investment promotion centers agency, who staff them? How do they respond? Where do they go? There is also the economic diplomacy when we have missions. Whenever I've seen in many countries, when the head of state moves, he's moving with investors from his countries. He's moving with key decision makers who have projects to go and sell. I think we need to use every opportunity to sell the country. And I think you are talking about Mauritania, and I'm sure that you want more to happen in Mauritania. But I can assure you that there is a lot of interest in Mauritania. I could tell you about some of the projects that we have in the pipeline. I will just tell you about the Desert to Power big project, interconnection project that we have done. And we are convinced that with electricity, we can see a lot more opportunities unlock in the beef sector in Mauritania. There are a lot of things that can happen in that sector. Agriculture, of course, better water management can help do that. So huge opportunities we can talk about those. When it comes to informal settlement, I agree with you that one of the risks that we are seeing is actually internally displaced people. So people of the country who are really moving around and what my President Adesina always called the disaster triangle, where you have rural poverty, you have environmental degradation, you have youth unemployment. You just have, unfortunately, the recipe to have this kind of movement without necessarily a conflict and creating a lot of pressures in some of these cities. So the way we look at cities, the way we look at investment to make them really a positive contributor to the growth in countries, will have to factor in these informal settlement, and that just gives us more opportunities to continue to work together.
Thanks so much. Peter, your closing reflection.
I have the impression when we didn't put forward the call to action that we have created an interesting framework which helps us galvanize the different forces around a couple of good issues that we have to focus on in 2024. One is really to scale and speed context-specific impact investment models that we are going to realize. The second, I would emphasize this alignment and collaboration, which is critically important, and it goes a little bit into the learning as well. We can't do that as standalone issues of aligning projects here and there. We need really this platform function for this new issue in order to be able to learn, to scale, and to speed. The last point I wanted to highlight is really more of a warning to all of us, because we have all mentioned it in our interventions, and I feel very deeply about this. I think whatever we are trying to do as outside actors, we have to build what we do on local capacities and build on what is there. Perception-wise, I find sometimes the international community a real disaster. And we talk badly those fragile, difficult contexts so that we even forget that there is something to build upon. So we will fail in scaling, speeding, collaborating, in everything which we have said, if this is not carefully calibrated on really promoting entrepreneurship, in opening market, in furthering access to market, in making what we think at market-based assistance to those fragile places that we think is of critical importance. So just these few sort of concluding remark and perspective, but I do believe, once again, if we find the key to those couple of critical issues, we hopefully are in a different place in a year's time.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. Just please stay tuned, get involved. We have big plans for this initiative, so hopefully you'll see it throughout the year and next year here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.